Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Grade 12 Mathematical Literacy webinar. I am going to allow for another minute or two just to get everyone settled in and allow some time for all the attendees to register and sign up for the webinar, or to join us rather. So just be patient, wait another minute or so with me. We will begin shortly. Okay, it does look like the majority of you guys are ready to get started, so let us go. Okay, so my name is Kimberly Brits. I am the educational specialist for mathematical literacy. Now, before we begin this webinar, let's just cover some of the basics. I do assume that most of you already are familiar with these, the basics that I would like to discuss now, but just bear with me. We will continue shortly. If you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be muted when joining the session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your questions in the question box below or on your right, or you can simply raise your hand. To raise your hand, click the icon on your dashboard below or on your right. Download this presentation and additional resources in the handout box below or on your right. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. Remember to send us your questions. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in the attendee being dismissed from the session. If we did not get to your question, please send an email to academics@impact.co.za. Questions in the question box will be answered and made available afterwards. If you did not receive the questions and answers, please send an email to info@impact.co.za. Then please remember to visit the Impact YouTube channel for recordings of this session. Great. So before we continue with today's topic of discussion, I would just like to make sure that all of you are done or at least nearly finished with all the content that you were supposed to cover for term 2. My advice to you during this uncertain time is to make sure that you stay on date and that you do finish the work for term 2 as quickly as possible so that we can start with the work that you are going to be doing in term 3. The reason I'm saying this is because due to uncertainty of how the remainder of the year is going to look, I would rather that you guys be on where you should be with your work instead of falling behind at a certain point throughout the year. Okay, so for today, I would like to have a look at the suggested work schedule for term 3. Then for the preliminary examination, we are going to look at the overview of paper 1, an overview of paper 2, and the weighting per topic, as well as how to use the attached resource that you can find in the handout box, and then lastly add additional resources. So at this point, I would like to just inform all of you, this session is going to be in English, the presentation of this session, but I have made all of these notes available in Afrikaans. So the webinar slides, they are available in Afrikaans in the handout box, and you will see that the attached resource or the additional resource with the name or the title is Elaboration of Context. You will see that is also made available in both English and Afrikaans. So make sure if you are Afrikaans listener listening in this morning, go download the Afrikaans resources so that you can follow along if you might have missed or misunderstood anything. Now let's quickly have a look at term 3 and the suggested work schedule. Now the key term for me there is suggested work schedule. So since we are working at our own pace, this is only a suggested framework of more or less how much time you should spend on each topic. So once again, if you work a little bit faster or you work a little bit slower, it is all up to you. This is just a suggestion. Now you will find in the table the first topic that you will be doing in term 3 is on maps, plans, and other representations of the physical world, with the subtopics, models, and plans. And you will see that here they allocated more or less 3 weeks for this topic. The next context in which we will be focusing on is probability or likelihood. And once again, you will have about 3 weeks to cover this topic. So after that, if you are done, I would advise that you start working through past papers, that you do some revision, that you get hold of additional resources so that you can get as much practice work in as possible. Now, the last thing is the assessments. Now, you will see that there is 2 assessments that needs to be done in term 3, which is a control test or a term test, which is 50 marks. And then you will be writing your preliminary examination, which is 2 papers, paper 1 and 2, and it will be 150 marks for each paper. Now, if you wish to have a more detailed description of the content of each paper or each test that you will be writing, I refer you to the assessment planner, which is available on my impact.co.za. There's a detailed description of all the assessments for the year, as well as the content of each assessment and the marks of each assessment. So please go and look there if you have any other questions regarding the assessments. Now, let's have a look at our preliminary examination paper 1. So the topics that will be covered in paper 1 is finances, measurement, maps, plans, and other representations of the physical world, as well as data handling. Paper 1 will count out of 150 marks, and you will have about 3 hours to complete the task or the paper. Now, paper 1 is your basic skills paper. So basic skills referring to straightforward mathematical skills. We will have a look at the levels that link with this basic skills that I'm now referring to on the next slide, so just bear with me. Then you will see that the paper is going to consist out of 5 questions, a question allocated to each of these topics, and then a 5th question, which is going to be an integration of all topics covered throughout the year. So you will see question 5 is going to be a mix or integration of these 4 topics. Then each question can contain more than one context. Now, what I mean by that is, say, for example, question 1 is predominantly on finances. Then you might come across a question or so that might be on the topic of measurement. So you will see plenty of integration between the topics throughout the paper. Then probability will be assessed but will be integrated in the context of other questions rather than a question on its own. By that, I mean that probability will be asked. It is expected of you to learn the topic on probability, but it is not going to stand on as a question by itself. Probability will be integrated in one of these 5 questions as explained. Okay, now let's have a look at table 2, which is the distribution of marks according to cognitive levels. So this should not be anything new to you. You will find in many of your study guides and facilitator guide, we constantly refer to cognitive levels. So just to quickly have an overview of that. In paper 1, you will see that there is only level 1, level 2, and level 3 questions, and that there is a 0% allocation towards level 4 questions. So you will see that the majority of your paper, so 60% of the questions in your paper, is going to be level 1 questions. 35% of the marks in your paper is going to be level 2, which is simply applying routine procedures in familiar contexts. And then 5% will be allocated toward level 3 questions, applying multi-step procedures in a variety of contexts. Now, for those of you who still do not understand entirely what I mean by these levels, let's quickly have a look. Level 1 refers to the use of mathematical facts and vocabulary. You will be required to predict answers and rounding off of values, as well as tested on theoretical knowledge. Level 2 questions are questions where you will need to complete known procedures, apply skills with more than one step, draw conclusions from given information, and make use of basic calculations learned from examples and exercises. Just to give you a quick example, because if we look at these points, an example might also help you to understand a type of question. So a level 1 question can be a question where they ask you to determine the date on which an electricity bill was issued. So if they give you the bill, you are required to go and look on the bill, see if you can find the date on which the bill was issued, and give that information through on your exam paper. So straightforward. If you know how to analyze a bill, it is theoretical knowledge, easy work. Level 2, an example of level 2 might be to determine a value before that was added. So it's not multiple steps, maybe 1 or 2 steps required to complete these type of questions. It is still straightforward, and you will find that most of these questions are similar to the examples and exercises that you have been doing in your study guide. Then if we look at level 3, you will see that these questions handle on complex calculations and high order arguments, no stipulated path to follow, and need conceptual and holistic approaches to the problem. So let's give you an example of that. Draw a graph to illustrate the income and expenses of a business. So you will be required to make use of multiple skills in order to solve the problem, and also you will need to make use of multiple topics perhaps to incorporate into a calculation that is needed for a level 3 question. So that is all for paper 1. Moving on to paper 2, you will see that the topics covered in paper 2 is exactly the same as in paper 1. Once again, finance, measurement, maps, plans, and other representations, and data handling. Paper 2 also counts 150 marks, and you will have 3 hours to complete the paper. Now, paper 2, we refer to it as the application paper for the reason that this paper is a multi-step, requires multi-step procedures in order for you to solve the majority of the questions. So this paper will have between 4 to 5 questions, similar to paper 1. So a question allocated towards finances, 1 towards measurements, 1 towards maps, plans, and other representations, and a question towards data handling. And as exactly the same in paper 1, probability will be assessed, but it is not going to be a question by itself. It will be integrated in one of the other topics. If there were to be a 5th question in your paper, exactly the same as in paper 1, it will be an integration of all topics. Okay. Now, if we look at the levels that will be assessed in paper 2, you will see that there is 0% allocated toward level 1. Therefore, paper 2 is level 2, level 3, and level 4 questions, with the majority of the questions or the marks being allocated to level 4, as it's 40% for level 4, 35 for level 3, and 25% towards level 2. So this does give you an indication. Paper 1 is mainly pre-knowledge, existing knowledge that you should have, skills that you should already be familiar with. It's quite a simple and easy paper compared to paper 2, where the majority will be level 4 questions, which is reasoning and reflecting and making use of multiple procedures to calculate or to determine or to solve a problem. Now, once again, we did cover this with paper 2 or with paper 1. So if we look now, you will see that level 2, level 3, and level 4 will be tested. Level 2, once again, straightforward, similar to examples and exercises that you have covered. So that's the easy questions in paper 2. Level 3 is your complex calculations, multiple steps, holistic approaches. And then level 4 is your unseen and not routine problems, or your higher order thinking. Now, I find it easy to explain these levels giving an example. So an example of a level 4 question can be to choose a strategy to compare the cost of 2 electricity systems, with the mean to determine which electricity system is the most cost effective. So for this example, you will need to determine, are you going to make use of a table? Are you going to make use of a graph? How are you going to interpret the information in order for you to come to a conclusion of which electricity system is the most cost effective? So once again, many skills required, many different types of calculations required to solve a level 4 problem. And unseen does not necessarily mean that you have never seen it. It is just higher order thinking questions that are unfamiliar in integration of many different types of skills. So just an unseen question, something that you might not have necessarily have already done. And this is why it's extremely important to work through past papers, because past papers gives you an opportunity to work with level 4 questions and to familiarize yourself with how level 4 questions are asked. And it's a good exercise to allow you to train a method of thinking or way of thinking to solve level 4 problems. Now, let us look at the weighting. Now you will see here at the top, the first part here in the table refers to basic skill topics, and you will also notice that there is no weighting provided for your basic skill topics, as these basic skill topics are integrated through all your application topics. So question 1 to 5 are all they all require you to make use of basic skill topics, which is to interpret and communicate answers and calculations. It is to do calculations with numbers and operations with numbers, and to be able to work with patterns, relationships, and representations. And other skills that fall within basic skill operation or basic skill topics is things like rounding off, estimation, making comparisons, analyzing, and drawing graphs. So that is basic skills that can pull through every single question in your paper. Then your application topics is on finance, measurement, maps, plans, and other representations, data handling, and probability. Now, what the weighting here entails is that 35% of paper 1 will be on finance, on the topic of finance. 20% of paper 1 will be on measurement. 15% will be on maps, plans, and other representations. 25% will be on data handling, and then a minimum of 5% will be on probability. Now, this weighting is true for both paper 1 and paper 2. So I think this is a great way just to give you an idea of what to expect in your papers, to know that the majority of your questions will be on finances and data handling, and that probability is not going to be assessed as much as finance and data handling, for example, will be. So this just gives you an indication on what topics to focus the majority of your time on. So great information to be aware of. Now, lastly, I would just like to inform you on how to use the attached resource. So you will see that the elaboration of context of die uitbreiding van onderwerpe, it's a PDF that is available in the handout box, and this is a must-have document. So please make sure that you download it, because if you don't download it, you are missing out on a great deal. Now, this is just a little bit of a snippet from that document. So you will find in the first column, we will see that over here we are now dealing with the topic of finances. In the first column, it says this specific section is on financial documents and tariff systems. And now what makes this document so great is that it gives you an idea of what type of questions. So those examples that I've mentioned earlier, this is where they come from. It gives you an idea of what type of question is referred to as a level 1 question, which questions are determined are seen as level 2, which ones are seen as level 3, and which one as level 4. So when you are preparing for your examination, it would be a really great and wise choice to have a look at this document to see, especially if you are preparing for paper 1, make sure that you are able to complete these questions, that you are familiar with how these questions work, especially if you are working with your with paper 2, preparing for paper 2. Make sure that you familiarize the type of level 4 questions, those examples. So these are just examples, and they are not going to be exactly like that in your paper, but it just gives you an idea of what to expect and how to order your way of thinking when you come across a question and you need to plan the path forward and on how to interpret and analyze a question so that you can get to a proper conclusion. So this is a great document to have on hand, and you will see that it covers all the topics with subtopics. So once again, download the document, go read through it, familiarize yourself with it so that you know how to study and how to prepare. Then just looking at our additional resources. So please make use of our guided learning platform, guys. Our guided learning platform, we have a function there which is called Solve by Chat. So when you come across a question where you are not sure exactly what's expected, how it works, make use of that function where you can drop us a question, and one of our tutors will automatically then be notified of your questions, and they will be readily available to assist you with that specific question. If you are working through past papers or additional resources or other books, or you are working through your study guide and you do come across a question where you are unsure of what's expected and you need a little bit of guidance and assistance, please send us an email to academics@impact.co.za. So during even this time where we are all working from home and studying from home, we are available to assist you with your learning. So send us an email so that we can help you in any way possible. Now, once again, leave your questions in the question box. If you have any uncertainties about the content that I've discussed today, please leave those questions in the question box. I will give you some feedback via email, so remember to keep an eye on your emails. And then once again, please remember to go and download those handouts. That is all from me for today. I will see you for the next webinar. Thank you, guys.